The twists and turns of the Built Bahr saga continue as BYU players receive an extra check from Built Bahr. What does it mean? Where are things going? And also 2 new offers for BYU football and basketball go out late in the week.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Coming to you on a Saturday. I know this is a little bit rare that we do this, but felt like there was enough news. I figured I'd sit down and do a special edition, especially considering how hot of a topic the Built Bahr saga with the BYU football program has been over this past week. There have been so many twists and turns. Originally, news breaking last Sunday via 6 players, 5 of them anonymous, in a report from the Salt Lake Tribune that they had not received the royalties they felt they had been, agreed to or assigned, I don't know how you want to, contracted or obligated to receive of sales of the Cougar Tail Built Bahr that Built Bahr put together. Nick Greer then responding via a piece in the Deseret News where he said he was aggravated and saddened, and it sounded just kind of miffed that BYU players were kind of going on the attack towards him and his company, as he points out that Built Bahr has invested, as they say, $1.25 million into the BYU football program over the past 2 years in particular. And they're looking forward to seeing what's next with regards to their relationship NIL-wise with BYU. But I guess the positive news out of all of this today, I'm recording this on Friday. It's going to come out on Saturday by the time I get it up. I'm recording it late Friday night. Is that Built Bahr wrote a letter and had players stop by their headquarters in American Fork, Utah, and handed out $600 checks to each of them. And they said this is essentially, so in the letter it says, now on top of all this, we want to pay you and every player from the 2022 football team an additional $600 to express our support to you and your teammates. This $600 payment is an extra 15% of the proceeds from sales of the Cougar Tail Puff. After making this payment, Bill will have paid out more than 30% of Cougar Tail sales back to BYU and the BYU football players. To be clear, this far exceeds the original commitment and hopefully leaves no doubt in your minds of our love and appreciation for you. We've always tried to show you this love to you with our partnership with each player on this team. I got to give credit to Nick Greer and Built Bahr. They didn't have to do this. They could have held and stuck to their guns and said that there is money coming, because there's a report out there that he said there's a discretionary fund that Kalani Sitake has access to, that money is supposedly being funneled via the contract that Built Bahr has with BYU over their marks and logos, that money, when it got into the discretionary fund that Kalani Sitake has, he could then disperse it out to the BYU football players. I would assume that it's still coming if it has not already been distributed to those players, but I think this is Built Bahr making it clear that, hey, they value the relationship with BYU, and at the same time, they want to make sure that BYU players feel like they're being taken care of. Now, my only concern with this is I'm worried about the PR hit that BYU already took on this front with regards to recruiting and that type of stuff. You can guarantee, even with Built Bahr, quote-unquote, making good with this, you can guarantee that there will be recruiting, battles out there where opposing teams, coaches, individuals who are going to use this story outside of the context of it all, really understanding the context, to recruit negatively against BYU. Now, BYU can go in and really show that Built Bahr stepped up to the plate and really went above and beyond the call of duty with regards to this extra money being handed out. But I just worry that the PR hit might have already had its impact, and we'll have to see what happens on that front. Now, the other thing about this is in reading this letter, this is an interesting thing to me, because they talk about over the past few years, our NIL initiatives have totaled over $1.25 million. We've always exceeded our commitments to BYU and the players. I think Built Bahr still is a little bit miffed about that report from the Salt Lake Tribune. Like I said, only 5 players were granted anonymity in that story. The 6th was Neil Pau'u, who was only a member of BYU in the 2021 season before exiting for his NFL fortunes. And as I understand, I had a conversation with BYU players, also been reported by the Deseret News, that during that season, BYU players were reportedly given a 10% offer in terms of royalty for a certain bar they were supposed to pub that season. So that, I think, is part of the buildup of some of the angst, I guess you should say, with these BYU football players. But just very interesting to me that this all is playing out kind of in real time. But like I said, I'm appreciative to Nick Greer. Obviously, Built Bar, in the interest of full disclosure, has been a proud sponsor here on the Locked On Podcast Network for a number of years themselves. But the interesting part about this, in this story, and I guess not in the story, in this column, that in this it says that BYU and their relationship with Built Bar, they are going to obviously try and figure out what they're going to do next with NIL. I do wonder if this at some point has given Built Bar maybe some pause in terms of potentially doing more NIL-wise with BYU football players. Will it cause other brands to potentially shy away from BYU? That question is yet to be answered. I think that will remain until we kind of see on the other end how many ultimately do shy away. If Built Bar decides to change their relationship, maybe they just essentially do what they've been doing. They've been sponsoring a number of elements with BYU itself. They've done like the broadcast booth for the BYU radio calls with Greg Rubel. It's been the Built Bar studio, that type of stuff. I wonder if they play more into that moving forward and back away from the NIL side of stuff for BYU football players. I hope they don't. Let me be very honest about this. I hope they don't pull back on the NIL element here, because they've been very good to BYU football players. An investment of $1.25 million is absolutely not nothing. And BYU players would lose out if they had some of these NIL opportunities taken away from them, because it's still, and I had a conversation with somebody just the other day, that essentially the 10% of the stars inside BYU football players, and even this extends out to the nation in terms of NIL, 10% of the biggest names in the sports inside of BYU and beyond are controlling the vast majority of the NIL dollars that are being thrown around. So that's the interesting part about this, is BYU's tried, and Kalani Sitake's made it very clear that he wants to see each one of his players, if they're going to do these NIL deals, he'd like to see as many team-wide deals as they possibly could get. Could this have a negative impact on those potential opportunities for the BYU football program? That is what I am wondering about, and we'll see what happens. I just wonder about how things are ultimately going to play out with all of this. But right now, it looks like everything's been made good. And if BYU football players are still miffed about this, $600 is not nothing, folks. And the thing about this is, I think a number of these young men may be thinking that they had some stars in their eyes. They thought, okay, we're going to be cashing in big-time money. And you shoot for the stars, you land on the moon. You've seen those. Probably heard that statement before. I just wonder about this, about where this ultimately ends up. Like I said, does it sour the relationship the Built and BYU football players have? We'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see where it ultimately kind of lands and where things shake out in the end. But I'm appreciative, once again, to Built Bar for stepping up to the plate. They didn't have to do this. Like I said, that's $73,800 being handed out in one day from Built Bar. If you go by the rough math, you double that, that's nearly $150,000 that's been paid out to BYU via the football program and to the players from sales of that Cougar Tell Built Bar. That means the sales of it actually went fairly well, because if 30% is $150,000, what are we pushing? Is that $600,000 of overall sales on that? It's interesting to kind of look at the dynamics at play here. So, like I said, I'm sitting down. I don't necessarily have an angle to really kind of push on this, and I'm not sure where I ultimately come down on it. My concern, though, I guess my angle is, my concern is, will this sour the reputation of BYU players and their, I guess, marketability via NIL? We'll see. I'm actually in the current process of locking up our upcoming season player guest for the entirety of the football season here on Locked On Cougars. And like I said, this doesn't slow me down personally from pursuing NIL opportunities, but I just wonder if there are bigger companies than me. I'm a small fish. Trust me, I ain't what Built Bar's doing. I'm not paying out 75 large to BYU football players. I don't have that type of cachet with this podcast, but I look at this and I wonder ultimately where the relationship with Built in particular goes, the relationships beyond that NIL for BYU. It would be interesting to see ultimately where it all ends up in the end. Like I said, I'm just kind of rambling here, so deal with it. It's a Saturday. It's an extra podcast. I'm reading different parts of this letter once again as I talk, and I appreciate what Built Bahr did. They kind of laid out exactly how things played out, how the contract was signed, what it was supposed to do. They said there were 2 payments made throughout the season. As our understanding that the portion of those funds will be made will make it to the football discretionary account to benefit you as agreed upon before launching the Cougar Tail Puff. We also have donated to the football discretionary account to ensure that our original commitment to player development has been more than met. So I thought this was a very measured letter by Built Bahr saying, hey, we're taking care of you guys, so be grateful for it. But at the same time, it's just interesting. It says, although we have yet to decide on how to continue our relationship next season with BYU and NIL, we thank those who have participated in the Built for Good program by sharing monthly on social media and participating in the service project earlier this year. Like I said, I'm hopeful that this relationship with Built Bahr and NIL will get kind of past this episode and ultimately will continue to be a fruitful relationship. But hey, like I said, only time will tell on where things ultimately end up. All right, I'm done rambling on that part. We'll talk about some other good news for BYU football and BYU basketball by way of 2 different offers that went out late this past week. I wanted to get to those as we wrap up this special edition of Locked On Cougars. But first, need to get a word in on our friends over at Perry Homes. They've been working with us for months now, and they're a fantastic local sponsor of ours. Whether you're looking for your first home, you're ready to upgrade to your dream home, my friends, Perry Homes has a house for you. For 50 years, Perry Homes is Utah's premier home builder with communities throughout the state. They have many communities, home designs, and price points to help meet your needs. Perry Homes has beautiful communities in Davis, Salt Lake, Tooele, and Utah counties. But more importantly, they offer over 50 unique home designs. No matter what you're looking for, whether it's a rambler, a 2-story home, or just a townhome, they've got designs to help meet what you're looking for. They're also offering generous financing incentives right now through their preferred lender as well. So obviously you can take care of it, make sure you get as low as an interest rate as they possibly can muster for you guys. So visit PerryHomesUtah.com to see what's going on in Utah's finest neighborhoods today. That's PerryHomesUtah.com to check it out now. For 50 years, Utah has been coming home to Perry Homes. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on our Monday edition of the podcast, I need to talk about what was said from the Big 12 meetings that took place late this week. I'm going to actually hopefully be able to get you, maybe we'll see if we can fit this in. I'm going to try and get some clips of some of the audio and video from Lawrence Skuvanik, obviously the president of Texas Tech and the chairman of the board of trustees, whatever the Big 12 is, and also Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, stuff on expansion, the new programs like BYU coming into the conference, what they plan to do for that type of stuff. We'll talk about that on Monday, as well as some of the other topics that may pop up between now and then. So stay tuned for that on our Monday edition of the show. But the good news is BYU continues to do work on the transfer portal, transfer portal trail, as well as the recruiting trail out there. In basketball, BYU offered LDS guard Brooks Bahr, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's a kid from Keller, Texas, down in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Good size on Bahr. A 3-star prospect, 6'4" athlete, really can shoot it well. And obviously, when you're not necessarily the tallest guy out there, you got to be able to shoot it. But he has exceptional numbers playing at the high school level down there in Texas. He's got more than 20 offers, including Wake Forest, Northwestern, Harvard, Yale, Utah State, among others. So he's got some programs who are absolutely after him. But BYU gave him that offer, and he told Vanquish the Foe, Robbie McCombs, that, quote, the BYU offer means everything. Getting the opportunity to play for a team I grew up watching and dreaming to play for. And the visit was awesome. Got to talk with the entire coaching staff, sit down with them, and break down my game and how I fit in. Check out all the facilities. I have a great sit-down talk with Coach Pope. I have great relationships with the entire staff, especially Coach Fieger, who has been my main recruiter. Really enjoyed getting to spend time with Coach Pope and getting to know him. Definitely going to take an official visit soon. I plan on going on a mission. So speaking of Bahr, he would be a guy you're probably looking at a couple years down the line. He's part of the 2024 recruiting class, so he would not enroll at BYU to 2026 or 2027, pending when he left on his mission. But averaging 21.3 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and almost 3 steals a game on 56% shooting from the field and 38% overall for Keller High School this past season. Absolutely incredible numbers. I think this would be a phenomenal pickup if BYU can add him to the 2024 class. They already have 4-star forward Isaac Davis committed to BYU, and they're currently also chasing Malik Diallo out of Wasatch Academy, and obviously Corner Canyon sensation Brody Kozlowski. You land all 4 of these guys, that's a pretty elite recruiting class for BYU, and I'm not just meaning just from BYU standards. I mean from like a national standard. That would be a phenomenal recruiting class for BYU. Obviously, trying to build themselves up going into the Big 12. The nice part is, as Robbie notes in his article for Vanquish the Foe, Bahr would be the only one who apparently is planning on going on mission. So you'd have these guys, most of them, if they were all to commit, immediately enrolling for the BYU basketball program. On the BYU football side of things, they had their first 7-on-7 camp over the last couple of days, and BYU gave an offer out to a local prospect by the name of Jett Nelson, 6'5", 210-pound athlete out of American Fork High School. And if you can't tap into more of what American Fork is doing on football, my friends, you need to, because this is a kid who is just kind of the latest in a long line of good pass catchers coming out of the American Fork football program. I'm lucky enough to go out and call a number of these football games around Northern Utah Valley, in particular Region 4, which American Fork competes in. I've had a chance to see Jett. He was kind of playing, I felt like third and fourth fiddle at times this past season for American Fork, but he flashed multiple times during the games I called for American Fork, and you can just tell he's got the size, speed, and weight combo that make you think, okay, this is absolutely a guy to keep an eye on. And according to reports, he went down to BYU 7-on-7 camp and really just shined, and BYU rewarded him with his first offer. Like I mentioned, he's got really good size, probably projects to play tight end at the next level. That's what 24/7 Sports lists him as a tight end. He kind of plays a hybrid big wide receiver / tight end role for the Cavemen in high school, but he put on that weight. He's probably going to come in at 230, 240 pounds and absolutely has the frame of one of those tight ends that BYU's kind of built their reputation on over the years. So I think this is a very savvy offer for BYU. I'm going to dig more into his film and see if I can identify some more things I like about him. But honestly, if guys like Fesi Sitake, Aaron Roderick, and Jay Hill are watching this kid up close, watching him in 7-on-7 and think, okay, this kid's got the goods, who am I to disagree? They know far more than I know. Their jobs are legitimately on the line when it comes to these evaluations. So I think this is a pretty good pickup, not good pickup, a good offer for BYU to get in early with a kid like Jett Nelson. He is a member of the 2024 recruiting class, so he would be in the upcoming signing class, maybe signing as early as December. But I think this is a solid pickup. A 3-star prospect rated number 80, according to 24/7 Sports. Doesn't have a composite rating quite yet, but obviously I'm sure that would come at some point. As BYU being a Power 5 program, when they offer guys like this, you can guarantee there are going to be a number of other programs who are going to slide in very quickly and be following BYU into the door and offering a kid like Jett Nelson. But I think it's smart for BYU to get in early with this kid. And like I said, if guys like Aaron Roderick, Fesi Sitake, and Jay Hill sign off on this kid being that good of a player to be worthy of a Big 12 offer, well, who am I to disagree? So that's going to do it for this special edition of Locked On Cougars. Like I said, I just had a couple of things on my mind, sat down late Friday night, knocked it out, and we'll reconvene on Monday and get back to one of our full editions of the podcast. But nonetheless, a big thank you to all of you for making us a part of your day. Thank you for being with us every single day and being making it your first listen, and more importantly, being everydayers with us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So until Monday, have a great rest of whatever is left of your weekend, my friends, and we will talk to you then. This has been the Locked On Cougars Podcast. See ya.